Hey everybody, Steve Joy here. I'm going to go over a couple campaign worlds. This is the Versus series, so it's Greyhawk versus Forgotten Realms. You can decide which one wins. I'm just going to go over a little bit of history, not a lot of detail, just show the worlds and give my thoughts on them and how I played with them. The first world I'm going to go into is Greyhawk. Greyhawk was the original first supplement for the original Dungeons & Dragons game. It came out, it looked like this. Now, this was basically a supplement, combat supplement. It doesn't talk much about the world itself. The world itself is only mentioned a couple times in here. Other than that, it's just essentially new rules for Dungeons & Dragons. To become the basis for the advanced Dungeons & Dragons later on. This is for the box set. This was the first supplement. There's a second supplement that came out, was Blackmoor. Blackmoor itself is mentioned in Greyhawk, so I don't know what happened there. I guess maybe Dave Arneson wanted his campaign world set in Greyhawk, or perhaps Gary Gygax just decided to put it there. But essentially, Greyhawk was Gary Gygax's home setting, and he would make reference to it, and references are made in the actual D&D rules even today. In the 5th edition rules, references are made to Greyhawk. Names like Bigsby's Crushing Fist. Bigby was a character in Greyhawk. And there's lots of different spells like that, different magic items, whatever, that originate back to the original Greyhawk. Even though this supplement isn't a campaign world, like I say, it only mentions it a couple times. Mostly it's just additional rules, as is Blackmoor. So I think what happened here was the original intent of D&D wasn't for people to play in other people's worlds. Well, as players, yes, but it wasn't, the idea wasn't that DMs themselves would play in other people's worlds. The intent was that you would make your own world. Something that I really think is important for D&D players to try out at some point. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing in someone else's world. I think it's great, especially if you're just starting out, or you're new to the genre, or you don't have time. There's lots of reasons to do it. Maybe you just don't want to make your own world, but it's a lot of fun to make your own world. So my understanding is that Gygax was under the impression that nobody would really want to play in someone else's world. Why would you, when you can just make up your own world? And you know, I feel like that's how I would have felt too at the time. Still do feel that way. But I understand why people would want to play in a campaign world. So I got the original box set when it came out, and it was published in the 80s, I believe. Let me have a look here. 1983. There we go. So this was sort of in response to people wanting to know more about this is where Blackmoor, there's an entry for Blackmoor in here. So this goes over the various different areas of the Greyhawk campaign. Now the entire campaign was not actually mapped out. The maps itself only cover a small portion because the limitations at the time, they couldn't print the entire maps. I don't even know if today they would, because it's a very large sort of world. But this was the main area where people would be playing. So this covered all kinds of things. Like here we're looking at regional products, different alignments in the different areas. This book's full of a lot of information, but it's not overwhelming with information. This is just sort of a leaping off point in my opinion. Now there's lots of modules that go into more detail about different areas, and they're set in different areas, like Temple of Elemental Evil, for example. I'm not sure if that one actually is, but there are lots of adventures. Like I say, here's one. I don't think this didn't come with the original box set. It was just was one that I had, so I included it. So this was an adventure that came with the actual world of Greyhawk. And This was the official world up until 2nd edition came out, I believe. So it has very beautiful maps, the game itself. The box set came with these gorgeous maps. So I remember back when I was playing, the maps blew me away. I had never encountered hexes and all that, and basically what this box set did was it served for me as inspiration. I never actually played in the campaign world. I didn't have any, I didn't know anybody that ran a game in the campaign world, and I didn't have any desire to run the campaign world. It sounds like me too, but what this did do is it inspired me to create my own campaign world. I mean, I love that there was weather for it. You know, I had all these little things in it that just little random tables, random encounter tables. It really set my imagination going, and encouraged me to create my own world. So I never actually played this. It's one of the reasons it's in such good shape. Like I say, because it was just inspirational to create my own world. And there aren't a lot of details. It's not really overwhelming, Greyhawk. You can pretty much do what you want with the campaign world. You can create your own stuff and interpret it your own way, because none of the areas, none of the locations, you're not really going to run into too many people trying to correct you. Oh, you did this wrong, or oh, this should be here and that should be there, and whatever. You may run into that. You may have run into that in the past with the older modules and stuff if people were really familiar with them. But even that, you can just hand wave it away, because it was never really laid out any concise way. Then later on, once Gary Gygax had been ousted from TSR, and then TSR itself wanted to started moving away from Greyhawk and started moving towards a new sort of campaign world for the basics of the game. So what they came up with was, instead of using Oath, they decided to use this one, Forgotten Realms, which is Faerun. It became the primary setting. Now this was created by Ed Greenwood, who created it basically as a child to base his stories off of. That's my understanding anyway. And he started playing in 1975. And then he started writing articles for Dragon Magazine. And he would refer back to the Forgotten Realms. And then once TSR decided that they didn't want to use Greyhawk anymore, they started hunting around for new campaign worlds. I remember that time quite well. I think, if memory serves correctly, they had actually mentioned it and that they were looking for a world, and they had put a call out for it. And I remember at the time, then all of a sudden they got, one of their insiders' worlds. Yeah, here we go. I didn't really believe that it was a real call. But still, it was neat. It was interesting to watch. I suppose lots of people sent stuff in. That's my memory. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I remember it happening. Anyway, so in 1987, they published this box set. Now, this one's really kind of interesting because Ed Greenwood did believe people wanted to play in a campaign world. And so this world was very filled out with quite a bit of detail. And for myself, well, I thought this was interesting. It looked a little too much like homework to me. It looked like history, and also I didn't like the compactness of the language in the book. I liked how Greyhawk was laid out. It was just easier, more visual for me. So I had an easier time with Greyhawk, sort of reading it and enjoying it. And then again, this is from that time, I believe, when they were trying to keep people from photocopying. So it's on this strange, well, it's not strange paper. I think the paper itself is printed like this, or perhaps it just came like this. I'm not sure. But anyway, I think the idea behind this was to keep people from photocopying it. Again, I took this as inspiration. I didn't really create I didn't really play in this world or DM this world. Again, because I was more interested in creating my own stuff. I got a lot of joy out of that. The thing about Forgotten Realms is there's so much stuff for it. There's other box sets of city maps and whatever for it. There's a lot for Greyhawk too, but there's way more for Forgotten Realms. And Forgotten Realms is still getting a lot of love even now. So it's sort of the main D&D world at this stage. And this is an adventure. I don't think this came with it. No, I don't think this came with it. I think this was just... yeah, I think this was just an adventure for it. Again, I would find inspiration from these things. Aha, second edition. There's the dreaded Thaco. This came with maps too. So this was one of the things. I actually contemplated playing this, and I was unable to. To this day, I'm not really sure at all what they meant by... What did they call this area? They called it something. Now, they have grasslands and they have plains. They called this clear. I didn't know what that meant, and I couldn't find it explained anywhere. So if somebody's going from this city to this city and I have to describe what's in here, okay, you're passing past a forest, but what are you going through? It's clear. So I didn't know if they meant like a clear cut. That's my Canadianness coming out. If they meant like grasslands, but not as grassy as grasslands. I couldn't understand it. And believe it or not, that's why I never played in it. Because what is clear? Clear doesn't exist. I don't know what that is. So I didn't know how to explain this because I didn't want it all to be grasslands. Because if I imagine it all as grasslands, then we've got huge wildfires going through everywhere. I'm a bit of a realist. Also, being Canadian, coming from Canada, a world that looks like this absolutely 100% makes no sense to me. Why are the forests little? Why isn't this all forest? I don't understand. Have these people been around so long that they've been able to clear cut all this? And is that what that means, clear? Is this just little trees and stumps everywhere and it's all been clear cut? Some of you are going to laugh at me, but I have no idea. Even to this day, I have no idea what they mean by clear. I do not understand the small forests. Even in Europe, before the Romans came, Europe was covered in old growth forests. France itself is located in the middle of one of the oldest, most amazing forests that ever existed on this planet. But the Romans cut it all down, making charcoal and coke for forging iron and so forth. So I don't understand what this is. I couldn't make heads or tail of it. It didn't make any sense to me. Still doesn't. I don't understand it. I would need some kind of explanation before I could play this world. So I'm not dissing the world. If anything, it's myself. I just don't understand. Oh, look at this. I didn't even know this was here. So one thing I really enjoyed about this, and I tried to use this in my own campaign worlds, because I thought it was neat, was that they had a plastic overlay for the world. So you could sort of use the grid system if you're used to it on, here's Baldur's Gate. So if you wanted to, go through this clear area. Again, I really don't know what that means. If this is clear, there's forest here. Unless this has been logged, we're talking about, unless this has been logged, industrial logging does this if you don't replant. But even if you don't replant, the forest will slowly start to grow again. Unless there's some force, which now there's Baldur's Gate here, so I suppose they're making the long hike to farm this. But they are, odds are, if they're doing, or not farm it, to cut down the woods, because you're going to need, this forest is not going to last very long with a big city sitting here. Not going to last long at all. And people aren't going to travel this amount of distance to harvest logs, because they're going to move the city closer. Because that's in the past, that's what happened. Now, sometimes if you're close to oceans, now they would build a small town here and they would float the logs over. So Baldur's Gate does have an excuse to still be there and they wouldn't relocate it. But very often, the cities would just end up relocating closer to resources. But there must be a resource close to this town. There must be some reason that's being kept here and it's not migrating over here. Because as soon as you build a port here, say, to move the logs out, say you're going to make some coke because you want to do some smelting, all right, or say you're going to make some ships. So you build a port here. Well, anybody here who wants to build ships isn't going to build ships here. They're going to migrate. They're going to build right next to the port that's shipping out the logs. And the people that want to build the ships there, they need employees, right? So they're going to bring their employees. Those people are going to need houses, so they're going to build houses. And the people that build the houses are going to need houses, and the people that build the houses and build the ships are going to need food. So people that make food are going to move there, farmers. So you're going to end up with a town growing here. You're going to end up with a large town. It's not going to take long before it's larger than Baldur's Gate, unless Baldur's Gate has some reason to exist. And this is way too far in ancient times for anybody to walk around when there's dragons and monsters and so forth in the area. And I'll give you a good example. In the early years of Rome, travel was extremely limited. And it wasn't because there were monsters. It was because there were wolves. And there were bears, and I believe there were tigers. There were lots of just regular old animals that would harass and eat people on the roads. And so, in particular, wolves. And so traveling in the early days, now I'm talking about the early days of Rome. I'm not talking about the empire. I'm not talking about when Rome had kings. I'm talking when Rome had consuls. People didn't travel very far between different cities because it was extremely dangerous. You would get eaten by animals very easily. Well, how much more so here? Right? So this was another. Now, I'm not criticizing Forgotten Realms. I understand it's a fantasy world, but in order for me to be able to play in it, it's got to be able to make sense, and it just never made any sense. Whereas Forgotten Realms, whereas World of Greyhawk did. World of Greyhawk, when you look at the map, it does actually make sense why things are where they are. I think in that way, I think Gary Gygax had a better handle of history and towns and so forth than Ed Greenwood did. Just my opinion. I could already see you leave counter arguments in the comment section, please, if you disagree with this analysis of mine. Yeah, I mean, look at we're talking 1 inch equals 30 miles. So, we're talking about this being at least 60 miles away. Well, 60 miles away, if you're on horseback, if you have a really good horse, yes, you can do it in a day. If you don't mind wearing your horses right out. So there would be at least one town between this, but generally speaking, there was always a town or a village at least 10 minutes away, or 10 miles away. Because that was in general, that was how most of the population could travel 10 miles a day, and that was it. We're even talking the United States, when the United States was first being hatched, and it was just colonies. There were generally towns were 10 miles apart, little villages, whatever, and railroads and yada yada changed all that. But we're talking in the very early days, and this is even earlier than that, supposedly. Now, yes, magic can change everything, but I don't see magic changing everything. I don't see any indications of the map. So I don't mean to be overly critical of Forgotten Realms. I'm just saying this is why I never got into it. I did contemplate it. I did like a lot of stuff in it. I found a lot of the stuff in it extremely interesting, and I thought that would be fun to play with. But again, in order to play it, it has got to make sense to me. And it just never did. Waterdeep was another one never made any sense to me. It was supposed to be a medieval city with a population of 1 million. Now, I know a lot of people are upset because I mentioned that the water wasn't very good in the Middle Ages, and apparently somebody on Reddit thinks that's not true. And sure, I mean, maybe not. We still have lots of trouble with water today, so I don't know how they couldn't have had trouble back then. But in my way of thinking, How much more so with a population of 1 million? Now, Rome did get up to a population of 1 million people at one stage. It's true. And there was a lot of difficulty there. And I don't want to turn this into a Roman, what Rome was like. But there were a lot of difference between Rome and a medieval sort of style city. So I know magic can change all of that. Maybe they had people blessing the water and so forth. That's entirely possible. But I'm just saying, for myself, this is why I never really took to the Forgotten Realms. And still wouldn't. Because, just for me... Yeah, there's the city. This is... Oh, no, that's a different city. I like the maps, though. I mean, look at that. That's a great map. Looks a little basic today, but still, it's neat. This is explanations of the regions and so forth. So it's quite a bit different if you compare it to Greyhawk. Because when Greyhawk does it, Greyhawk, you're not really expected to know as much information, and it's sort of in bite-sized chunks, which I really enjoyed. And this was more like a wall of text. So this looked more like a school book to me, something that maybe I would have to study in school and learn, and I felt like there was no way I could retain all this information. And some people can, and I mean, my hat's off to you. That's really amazing. But unless I make it myself, I'm not really going to be able to remember all this stuff. And the other thing I liked about the Greyhawk World of Greyhawk is that it had lots of tables, weather generating tables and stuff like that. And I don't see the tables in here. Again, that would have drawn me back to Greyhawk. But like I say, I never even played in Greyhawk. It was more like an inspiration. I did want to play in Forgotten Realms, but unfortunately, like I say, for those problems that I just couldn't get my head around, I couldn't figure out how to work it out. I never ended up playing it either. And it never actually really served even as a source of inspiration for me because of the walls of text. I thought it was interesting that people would like this. That fascinated me. And then later on, so much material came out for the Forgotten Realms. It's just absolutely fantastic. Books and books, hardcover books of all the different areas and everything. So much information on the Forgotten Realms. So for a guy like me, that makes it kind of intimidating. I all of a sudden don't feel like it's really a world I can mess around with and trying to memorize even just this supplement, even me just trying to remember all the dates and the people and all the areas and everything is just way too daunting. Whereas if I can just look it up very quickly in a book and I've just got one little paragraph with some adventure hooks and some ideas and just a little, quick general what's going on there, boom, I feel a lot happier going in there and just making stuff up and, having a happy adventure. Whereas this one, I'm like, should I say that there's a king or this thing or that thing happened? I need to go back. I need to look in some of the other books and see if this area has been covered. Are there characters here? Was there an adventure set here? Now, in Greyhawk, you're going to run into that. You're going to run into, there might have been an adventure set here. And you might go back and you might find that there was an adventure set there. That is something that if you play in the world of Greyhawk, you might want to keep track of that, because there are a lot of old modules that were actually set in Greyhawk. And there's a lot of modules that are set in the Forgotten Realms as well. So there would be a need to go back and check those and just see if something happened there, if the history that you're trying to create or the adventure you're trying to create is gonna cross over anything else. Now, some people may not care about that, and then I can see playing in the Forgotten Realms would be great. And then some people are just really good at knowing that kind of stuff and just keeping that amazing detail in their heads. I'm no good at that, so that isn't a place I can go to. Yeah, so that's it. For me anyway, in this versus, Greyhawk is going to win for the reasons that I mentioned. But I can see how lots of people would go for Forgotten Realms too. So please leave a comment and let me know, what did I get wrong? Or did I get something wrong? Which is your favorite one? their details. You know, I left out a lot of details, so if you want to fill in on details, or even just tell me about your adventures in either of these campaign worlds, because they both look awesome. I wish if somebody had wanted to DM in Forgotten Realms, I would have loved that. I would have played it, because you know, if somebody else was going to keep track of all this stuff. But for actual DMing itself, I would gravitate over to World of Greyhawk. And then just for inspirational purposes, these two books were immensely inspirational to me at the time that I was using it as inspiration. So, yeah. Okay, well, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for listening. And like I say, please leave a like and please leave a comment which one you think wins. Am I full of crap here? Do you like this one better? Do you like this one better? Which gets your vote? So I'm not saying I'm just saying for me, Greyhawk wins. It's entirely subjective. All right, thanks a lot for watching and take care.